folks. Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And a guy who I've been tracking for some time. I never really thought I'd ever get to him. Master rhythmist who has found a lot of success, frankly, across the pond in Europe and made a name for himself playing with so many luminary musicians. But I think all those luminary cats would be the first to tell you that a lot of their tracks on records and a lot of their live performances wouldn't mean a whole lot without Gerry Brown. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Very happy and honored to be here.
It is an honor to connect with you.
How are you doing today?
I'm having a ball, man. Absolutely, positively. That was what we came in with. And
yeah, it's like I was wondering what the hell. That sounded familiar, and it's like, oh, if that was me, it's like, oh God.
This is my first question. I really just want you to talk about the Gerry Brown concept. I'm very fascinated with the concept of any note can be the one. And I feel the music that you grew up with, that you played with even before you got into a professional career. I just want you to talk about your concept of any note can be the one.
Boy, any note that can be the one. Well, I would say that concept comes from the a bit of from what I noticed of when I listened to, and still just recently seeing a video clip with Elvin Jones, and that was when he came with his playing wherever the quote unquote one was, everybody knew it. And it was it's like putting your foot down. Like, here's the one. So that any note can be the one is yes, that's true. But when you put that emphasis on where that one should be, and hopefully everybody's on that same groove, because that point of reference everyone has to be on the same page. So you're taking that responsibility of like, where the one is. So that's where that concept comes from, and quite naturally that the drummer, we're that focal point of where that one is. So hopefully everyone's on the same page, and that you're grooving, and your time is really, really beyond good, but almost impeccable. And even if it kind of sways a little bit, as from the days of when the drummers were not playing to click tracks and things like that, and hearing some of the from swing to R&B and stuff, those wonderful days in the 60s and 70s. The drummer is the hot, it's kind of like the hot seat. So you have that responsibility of leading the band or singer or whatever. It's like, you have control of that. So,
well, I want to talk to you about this. You talk about everybody being on the same page, and I want you to go back. Did you grew up in Philadelphia?
Yes, I did. With some marginal bass player, some guy named Stanley Clark.
Yeah, no, my man Stanley. I want to talk to you about. This is so cathartic for me, man, because I love. Can you just talk about the band that you were in early on in the '60s, when everybody got on the same, is it just about experience on the bandstand? Is it about, I mean, because being on the same page, that's exactly right. Everybody has to come back in on the one if you lose the one. So what was the first?
Exactly.
What was the first gig you had where everybody got on the same page? Was it with Stan Clark?
It was with Stanley, and the story is in Philadelphia. I mean, I met Stanley. We were about 12 years old, and this was at a time where school systems had music, all city music groups in elementary school, in junior high school, and in senior high school. So I met Stanley when we were 12, and he had just made this transition from playing. He originally started out as a cellist, and then he went to bass, and we eventually talked, and we found out that we were listening a lot to the same music. He was listening to Charlie Mingus and Scott LaFaro.
Oh, I love it. I love this, dude. Oh, my God.
And Coltrane and Elvin and stuff. And then we were also listening to like the R&B that was being played, like the Temptations and James Brown. And what was really important was like listening to like the James Brown and the R&B of those days was that there were dances that were going on in the high schools and stuff, and there were some band leaders in Philadelphia that would put bands together to perform for these dances. So it was like, for me, it was so important to know those James Brown grooves and to know those songs from Temptations and Smokey Robinson and Four Tops. You were starting to get a little more into there was like the Spinners. So it's like all these songs you had to know these blues because that pertains to playing these gigs. And if you didn't know those grooves, you're not going to be playing on those gigs. Also, in those bands there was another great musician who was older than Stanley and myself, but he was also playing in those bands from Philadelphia, and that was the great saxophonist, rest in peace, in Groove in Paradise, Mr. Grover Washington Jr.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh, rest in peace, Grover, man, dude. Earth Tones. So you're telling me that this band, Grover, and was Stanley rocking the upright, or was he playing electric?
No, he was playing electric then. He was, he was getting into the electric thing and stuff. Besides, he's doing the upright stuff. A la Reggie Workman and Cecil McBee and Scott LaFaro and he was doing that, but the upright. But
filthy. He was the filthiest upright player. But you're telling me that Grover, Gerry Brown, and Stanley is a trio? I mean, this is the most burning thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, it wasn't. It was more than a trio. I mean, there were other musicians, other horn players, and keyboardists and guitarists. There was even a couple times where, and God rest his soul, he just made a transition recently, and that was the guitarist Reggie Lucas.
He just passed. You're absolutely right. I was going to ask you about him.
Yes, he was in some of those bands as well.
So let me ask you though, aside from having to play a deep bag of pop tunes from across all genres, do you feel like you guys also were creating new musical vocabulary on the bandstand?
Well, I guess, in retrospect, I guess we did, started to develop some some new concepts and I guess maybe some early days of linear playing, with Stanley, what he was doing on the bass. What I was trying to do was drums and playing along with Stanley and these concepts, and that it had to groove, and just the fact that when you could use these concepts and still see people dancing, and that they were enjoying it. This is a very, wow, we have some influence on the bands, like, the bass and drums. And, I've often said, bass and drums, that's half the sound of any great band. And, that's the foundation. So,
well, no, because it's really important. This is because we're talking to a titan here, Gerry Brown. And because that's what Stanley was telling me. We've done 2 interviews. He's like, it's kind of a best kept secret in the world is that the rhythm sections are the ones that drive new musical vocabulary. He was talking about it in the sense of people like Tony Williams and Ron Carter. You could go to Paul Motion and Scotty LaFaro. But like we let in with that absolutely positively thing, and you're playing like, that's all you, man. And that there's nothing like that at that time going on. So, when you're playing press rolls, you're playing marching, funk. I don't even know. But the point is, was there even out once you left for Europe? Was there a time when you guys really felt like you were where a rhythm section was creating, where you were part of a rhythm section that was creating new musical vocabulary?
We both felt that, and although after college, not even after college, just the fact that while we were in college, Stanley kind of went his way in 1971, 72, that he moved to New York, and then he was like the new monster of a bass, and just remembering articles that I was reading that there was this like a rivalry with Stanley and the great bassist Miroslav Vitus.
Of course.
So I was reading about that, and it's like, my man Stanley's like, that's my bud. We've known each other. And it's like he's getting up there, and I'm trying to do my best, and hearing Tony Williams, with the life, Tony Williams' Lifetime, and there was one experience in particular that I went to New York to this a club that was called Slugs.
Sure.
And it was there, although I wasn't able to get inside, but I heard the music from the outside, and that was like that first Tony Williams' Lifetime with John McLaughlin and Larry Young was playing organ.
Oh.
And I heard that band, and what Tony was doing is like, just kind of like, just what I was hearing was like jaw dropping. It's like, oh my God. So it's like, I'm hearing that. I met Alphonse Mouzon.
Oh, dude, another rest in peace monster funky Snakefoot right there, man.
Yeah, so yeah, I was kind of in the middle of maybe not as well known as totally not as well known, but I was there and I heard that, and then when Stanley got together playing with Lenny White, so it's like these monsters, and then Billy Cobham with the band. So it's like, man, there was so much inspiration and information.
You're darn right about Gerry. And it was right in your face, and it was visceral, and everybody was accessible. And
Yep.
what were some of the? I mean, because like there are live recordings that were pressed on vinyl of Yusef Lateef playing at Pep's. I mean, you might. Who were you playing with at Pep's? Was it Jimmy Heath? I mean, who were some of the cats? I mean, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say is like Lenny White's dad. Lenny would take him to the. Lenny's dad would take him to the club. Jackie McLean would yell at him all night. I don't want backbeat. Don't give me any backbeat. You know. And then Lenny's dad would take him home, and they'd get up at 7 a.m. and Lenny would go to school and Dad would go to work. But the point is, he was 13 playing with Jackie McLean, and I'm like, okay, Jerry Brown, that's great. You're reading the articles about Vitruvius and Stanley. But who were you? Who were some of the iconic cats that you had a chance to play with? You were definitely.
Well, I mean, I would say like after I went to Europe in 1972, and I had the experience of playing with quite a few musicians in Europe. But when I came back, the first guy that I played with in '74 was a gentleman who I met in Europe. That was the violinist Michael Urbaniak.
Wow! See, that's what I'm saying. You're way out, man. You're such an because you played with what's his name, Zygmunt Seifert. Well, I can't pronounce his name ever.
Zygmunt Seifert.
Seifert, yeah.
Yes,
no, I mean another mercurial cat.
Yes, another violinist, and but in the Michael Urbaniak band was the bassist was a guy who I met that I was introduced to back in Philadelphia, and he was the cousin of Reggie Lucas, and this person was the great bassist Anthony Jackson.
Jeez.
So he was in the band. So another absolute monster. So
that's right. You were wait, hold on. You were on those Funk Factory album, weren't you, with the Urbaniak?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh
that's
my
right.
God,
right.
man! Now it's all coming back, dude. Because I know that Jackson was playing, but Gad was on a few tracks. You were on a few tracks.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question though. I this is interesting with Stanley and Grover, being that you. We have another track queued up. Maybe we may or may not get to it in set one here, but I mean, you were obsessed with this third stream of rock and blues, jazz, and classical music. I mean, was that something that you guys were? How did you get into this classical vein, and how did you integrate it into the blues and the funk and the jazz?
Well, first of all, ironic that when I was, first started playing drums. Okay. Before that, not many people know this.
I know. That's why you're on the Jake Feinberg show now.
But anyway, my parents, they loved to dance, and although they lived in Philadelphia, they often went to New York to the Savoy Ballroom. Make a long story short, when my mother was pregnant with me, she was dancing in the Savoy with my dad. So I was hearing like the Lucky Millanders and whoever else was playing at the Savoy at that time. So I was hearing that from the inside. So now here I am born, blah, 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 blah. I started playing drums when I was about 5 years old. But when I started playing, it was rudimental drumming. And my teacher at that time was originally his name was Jake Hoffman, but he was a classically trained drummer. However, he was on the road so much, so he turned me over to his daughter, Elaine Hoffman-Watts. So she started me on the whole classical thing. And so I'm learning, the rudimental drumming and two mallet and four mallet, and xylophone, and listening to the, Philadelphia Orchestra. Stanley was doing the same thing, but from the class, from the cello and bass side.
Exactly.
So we had this foundation of the classical music. And I believe that, you know, if you've gone through this training of classical, being a classical whatever, you really, for whatever instrument, you really get to know your instrument and, you know, technique. And I believe that if you stay with it, it's easy to develop all this technique, and it really shouldn't be anything that you can't play. So I believe that with that foundation, Stanley and I, and I'm sure, and many others, kind of figured out, it's like, well, you know, you can take a lot of these things from, you know, classical, and you can apply it to jazz. You know, just having that classical foundation, and it lent itself to anything and everything.
Gerry, I'm curious about, I guess, because I know you went to Europe, but I mean, you had to make a name for yourself in the States. Who were you playing with here before you left for Europe?
Not really. I was just, you know, in college and you know, playing some local gigs in Philadelphia. There was a trio that I played with. That it was with Stanley Clark and a gentleman who we knew and turned out to be Stanley's brother-in-law. His name was Charles Fambro, and Charles played in. He played in one of the Art Blakey bands. Like, and he was in the Art Blakey band when Wynton was in the band.
Wow, he must have been. So wait, I mean, hold on. Where are the tapes of this, by the way? I mean, I need to hear tapes of this immediately. I mean, this is the most insane.
I don't have any tapes, but it used to be a trio. And what was funny was that Stanley and Charles Fambro, their favorite pianist was McCoy Tyner. So we would play like these trio gigs, and they would trade off first set and second set. Stanley would play piano, and Charles would play bass. And
oh boy! Holy! I mean, so, and this was a local. Did you get a chance to? Was this all Philly, or did you go up to New York and play in this?
No, just all in Philly.
Oh, this is insane.
But you know, this training ground, and you know, working with these two great, you know, musicians and bass players. So. You know, I would say so much of my success is due to the great bass players that I played with growing up. Now, Stanley, Charles Fambro. There's another bassist from Philly that you probably know of, who I played with in those early days, and that is Alphonso Johnson.
Wow. Al, did you? And the other cat I was going to ask you about is Tyrone Brown.
Oh yes,
I could listen to. All I do is listen to him and Sherman Ferguson all day long. That's all I do, man.
Yeah. Now, God bless Sherman Ferguson. I met Sherman when I was about 14, and you know, he kind of straightened me out because I thought I was like a young hotshot. And, you know, he kind of straightened me out, and so you know, another great drummer who was from Philadelphia, but Tyrone Brown. Yeah, he played on some of those gigs where when Stanley wasn't on these R&B dances with Grover Washington. Tyrone Brown was there, so I had this unbelievable luxury of playing, you know, with all these great bass players. Also, I mean, Anthony Jackson. I mean, before the Baniac, we played together because he would come to visit his cousin Reggie Lucas in Philadelphia.
What did those cats? What did they help you with the most? I mean, what did you learn most from Anthony and Tyrone and Stanley and those guys as a rhythm accompanist?
Just finding that niche of where within that whatever style of music that you're playing together, or playing together with the basses and realizing that it's all a conversation. You're having this conversation with the bassist. You're having a conversation with the other musicians, but mainly with this conversation with the bassist. And that's the foundation of the music. You can do a little fill here, there, or something rhythmically, but then ultimately come back to where that groove is to be, and allowing that space.
Oh, I love
that's
this.
The magic.
This is insane.
That's the magic.
What did Sherman tell you specifically? Like, aside from just saying you're not that hot, kid. I mean, what was there?
Yeah. But that was awesome, man. You kind of playing a little much there. You're playing a little much there, Gerald.
Do you think? I mean, stepping back from it. I mean, everyone's got to sing for their supper, but has there been a break in the lineage of the music just because you had elder statesmen telling you straight up, hey, you're playing you're talking too much, just settle down. Then you could actually go see these cats 6 nights a week. They were all accessible. There was huge touring circuits. And I just look at it now and I used to think it was a supply and demand issue, too many musicians, not enough clubs. And then there's also a patronage issue. But has there been a breakdown in the lineage of melodic improvisation? I hate the word jazz. But I just want you to, do people go back far enough as it relates to the lineage of this music?
That's a great question. Jake, that's really a great question.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got to do part 2 pretty soon. We got more, man.
I don't know if there's.
And I'm relating it more to younger. I'm relating it more to maybe possible students you have or younger cats, not your generation.
I would say that I don't know if breakdown, but there's been a crack somehow where there's been a bit of a separation. Where when I was growing up, there were all these. As you said, there were all these great drummers. There was all this great music that was coming out. There was a time where, be it jazz or R&B, these artists were putting out two records a year.
Exactly.
There was no internet; hadn't even been thought of. There was radio. You knew of the jazz stations that you could listen to, the R&B stations that you could listen to, the blues stations that you could listen to. And again, as you said, there was like a touring circuit, and these people were coming through all the time. So you could see these people was, it wasn't as difficult as it is now, in the fact that, there are not clubs that patronize to the musicians, to that music. You have to listen to serious radio to hear some jazz stations, or specialized radio, the Pandoras and Spotify. So that's changed. The clubs that used to be no longer exist. I want to push back on this, because I mean,
what I'm seeing is, again, I was born in 1978. Okay, but Art Blakey used to say, "My job is to wash away the dust of everyday life for those cats who were coming in after a long day. It was blue collar music, and it's turned into sort of this
blue collar.
It was this upper. It's turned into this, like, I mean, if you have a few $100, listen, the only way I'm going to see live music today is if I get comp tickets. Like, I'm not going to go to the Iridium or to go to these hoity-toity things. Jazz has become this. Some would say that around the time of this John Lee, Jerry Brown explosion, when, quote unquote, even though the first fusion music was Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie, they just said jazz became an inside joke for jazz musicians. But I just look at it and I say there's just something wrong here when you are basically placating to a drink order, a dinner order, and the check, hour and a half set, goodbye, bring in the next people. I mean, it's become a chop shop. It's become very corporatized. And to me, you sap all the spiritual, potential spontaneity and spirituality out of the music. I'm sure there's a lot of clubs in Europe like that, but in this country, we're on a formula trip, and that's why when you can't detect authenticity in music, then it just spreads all the way through society. You want to know where fake news came from? It's because people can't detect it. Because we've been living with digital music I'm throwing a lot at you. All I'm saying is that jazz was a groove music intended for people, not rich people, people.
Just people. Yes, people. Yes, correct. And unfortunately, in the U.S., even more so now, there's little to grasp onto of hearing great music or seeing great music, or that it's that it's branded, and what it truly is a cultural. This is something of a cultural based feeling with America. It's like it's one of the greatest gifts that America has given to the world of these genres of music, and it's to be celebrated. It's very, very celebrated in Europe, and it's governments, they subsidize the music, they subsidize the club. So there are so many musicians from America who are going to Europe, have been always going to Europe, but now more so than ever, where they have difficulty living in America and performing the music in which they love so much, with jazz, and musicians are seeing it's like I need to go to Europe for 2 or 3 months in a year, and that will allow me to actually raise a family from what they would earn in Europe. That kind of makes it possible for them to raise a family. It's so much harder now as an upcoming musician to raise a family. At one time, back in the day, you could do that. That was much easier to do, and I did it. I have a son who's 41 years old, and grandkids and stuff. He was raised. Now, it's much more difficult, and with all the stress of what's going on, particularly here in America, boy, to be able to raise a family and be a musician.
Forget it. Yeah, no, it's but I mean, just an artist in general. I know you. We got to do part 2 as soon as possible, but I know you got to get to the airport. But I wanted to just ask you about the first time that you actually, Larry Willis talked to me that when you stifle the culture, which we're really good at now, we gentrify these neighborhoods like Harlem. But when you stifle the culture, that's how another Hitler comes to power. And I just wanted you to talk about your first time going to Harlem. I remember talking to Pat Martino. I think my first interview, I've done about 3,000 radio interviews, and Pat told me that he left Philadelphia to go to Harlem, and the people that took him in were Billy James and Don Patterson and Red Holloway. Wow. And those, I mean, the point is that it was a bastion of it wasn't just all black commerce. It was also, the culture was out in the street. Sugar Ray Robinson had a jazz club there. You had all clubs there. And the culture was, and can you talk about the first time that you went to Harlem and experienced that?
Well, it wasn't so much Harlem, but it was really even up to New York, and you knew growing up in Philadelphia, it's like, okay, Philadelphia has some things, but you got to go up to New York,
right?
And it was just a magic. It was just a magic time of all this music, all these musicians who you could run into, readily available heroes who were walking on the streets or playing in clubs that you could get into. You could see them. You could hear this great language of inspiration and culture, and you could sit in it, and you would resonate with it, and then you'd leave, and you just had one of the numerous epiphanies of what you just heard, how that can relate,
right?
To your
it's called introspection. It's called introspection,
and that there were less distractions that allowed you to put in the work,
right?
To practice, that you had the desire and the motivation to do this because you're looking at this. I would love to play like that. Yeah, I did one. I don't know if you ever heard this story, but my dad, he was not a musician, but he just loved jazz and blues, and he bought this album from Art Blake and the Jazz Messengers, and I'm listening to the Blues March,
right?
And I'm listening to him playing in these press rolls that he did, and I was probably about 9 years old or something like that. I'm taking lessons, and I'm listening to that, and I started crying, and my dad says, "Well, why are you crying?" I says, "Dad, I'll never be able to play a role like that." You just keep practicing. You just keep practicing. Listen. So,
this is important. The introspection was insane. That's what this music is all about. If I was alive at that time, it would be about walking out of that club and being completely introspective, saying, "Man, I wanted to play like that," or "Wow, that was very emotional," or it would make me think about a relationship. Today, we have just gotten so accustomed, and I know it has to do with the academy, the fact that people are coming out of the academy. We've just been taught to stare and appreciate somebody's facility. Some cats would call that wanking it. And that just drives me insane. To me, this should be the most spiritual thing in the world, and I thank God that you guys are still around to be able to express this on programs like myself, because it's spiritual.
Well, it is spiritual, and as my father would say in response to what you said, part of your divine contract is not only that you've studied and you put in the work, but you have to pass this on.
Exactly. He's nailed it, man.
You got to pass this on. That's it. That's your divine contract concerning music. You've done this. You've made all these experiences. Now, you got to pass this on. So, we have to do a part two. And maybe
Hey,
a part
no.
three.
What I was going to propose to you also, I don't know what your touring schedule is like, but because we're going to do part two like next week if you're around. But I'm going to be out in Los Angeles June 17th, 18th, 19th, and if you're going to be around, I would love to get together and do a Facebook Live interview with you.
I will be around.
All right. Well, let's do part two on the radio because we haven't even touched this this
There's
ridiculous.
a lot of stuff to talk about, man.
Hey, man. Much love to you, Gerry, and
Much love to you, and it's all about the groove because groove don't lie.
well, and it's all about the heart too, man. So, anyway,
All about the heart too.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Jake.
Be
Thank
good,
you
Gerry.
so much.
Later, man.
All right.
Bye-bye. Gerry Brown. We got part two and part three, and how many more, I don't know. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we will be back tomorrow on Facebook Live with a two-handed, four-hand piano, Steigerwalt. Until then,